Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, I wanted to make a compilation about signs that your ex still misses you and still loves you. We're going to emphasize more about missing, them being possibly on a rebound, the stages they're coming back. And the stages that are coming back is actually the sign that they do love you. So that's kind of where the love aspect comes into this, because most of the time, if an avoidant leaves you and they want to come back, the reason they left is a trigger. It's not necessarily the lack of love. So them wanting to come back usually is already a sign of love. And sometimes we can see these differences with relationships. And it's not to be discouraged and think this because it's not happening, they don't love you. It is definitely a pretty strong sign that they do. But if they're not doing it, doesn't mean they don't. And so actually, the first trait that we're going to talk about is actually aspects that maybe made them leave, so that you can understand it's not their lack of love, but possibly a trigger. And then from there, we might talk about rebound. We might talk about them missing you. We might talk about stages that they're coming back, as well as maybe some ways how to get them to respond so that you guys can reconnect. So that's where we're going to go today.
Today, we're going to talk about the reason an avoidant broke up with you. I think this topic is a little bit misunderstood, and some of you guys are in a situation where you were in a long-term relationship or whatever relationship, and an avoidant broke up with you and it didn't feel like it made sense to you because maybe they're coming back or they offered friendship or there was a lot of love, and so it's not fitting. And so a lot of times it's because a lot of avoidants, they deactivate when they feel too much emotion or when they feel triggered or whatever it is, and sometimes their knee-jerk reaction is to break up with you. And there's a part of you that subconsciously knows that, or you know it and you're denying it because you're afraid to have hope. This video is not to give anybody false hope. I just want to give information because this is true. This is some stuff that I see, and so I want to share it. The first one actually is a more genuine reason that they broke up with you, although it might not come across that way initially. But some avoidants might feel these ways and it's bottled up throughout the relationship. And it's that they repeatedly said something that they felt was important, but you took it as them not caring or refusing to do so, okay? So maybe they said, can you make sure to pick up your clothes off the floor? Very basic one. And they tell you simple things like that. In their mind, they think it's simple, but you took it as criticizing, or you took it as them finding fault within you, when it's not necessarily they're finding fault. They just, as I've talked about on this channel many times, a lot of avoidants just have control issues, right? A lot of them do. I used to have a lot of control issues with so many things. I mean, I didn't even I know some people are like this, but I like certain things in the dishwasher in a certain way because to me, there's more room. The water hits it a certain way. I want it arranged a certain way. Certain things in the top rack versus the bottom rack, how you put the utensils. And some people are like that, but I didn't like even when people would come over and they were being kind and saying, hey, let me do the dishwasher considering you cooked all day. Let me put the dishes away. I'm just like, no, let me do it. Like, I want to make sure it's perfect. Instead of thinking this is a kind gesture, let them do it. It's okay if the dishes are not perfect. Like, let them in, right? So avoidants don't realize that they're pushing you away because they're like, no, this is my space. I have to be in control. And so that's why they tell you, let's say, for example, pick up the clothes off the floor. You think, oh, they're criticizing, they're making fun of me, whatever it is. But what happens is it might be their own issue, or maybe you just throw clothes on the floor. I don't know what it is, right? But it's not what they're saying. It's the fact that as they continue to say it and say it and say it, you dismiss them, you brush them off, you make them feel like what they're saying is not valid. You could do what they say, but then maybe after a couple months, couple years, depending on your relationship, you might say, hey, I noticed that you're really particular about where I put clothes. Do you think that sometimes you could just lay off a little bit and just let me do what I need to do? Tell me if there's a limit, but I feel like it's a little overwhelming. You can have that conversation, but still hear them. It's important. The next one is about you feeling emotionally overwhelmed and them feeling like they have to regulate you for you. You might not even ask that, but they feel confused and they're not able to regulate themselves. So what ends up happening is you're having a lot of emotions about whatever it may be, and then they're having a lot of emotions in response to that or not sure what to do. And now this feels like they might have to be responsible for fixing your emotions, or they feel like they have to process your emotions and their emotions, whatever it may be. And that has so much pressure for them that they actually feel burned out a little bit, okay? The next one is any form of communication breakdown to which both of you, it's not just your fault, feels like it ends up escalating quite quickly. Emotional intents arguments, disagreements, and conversations can escalate quickly. They typically do. And what ends up happening is these small disagreements actually turn into these basically big, blown out, crash out type arguments, right? And then what happens is the avoidant individual wants to withdraw, but you might be pursuing them to come out of that withdrawal state. And so what ends up happening is they feel like, okay, I don't know what else to do. Let me just break up so I can get that space. And that is not a genuine breakup, because it's not that they don't love you or they feel like the relationship isn't good enough. It's that they're deactivating. They're afraid, I need space. I don't know what's going on. This keeps happening. Maybe I need to just be by myself, right? That's a really common reason. The other one is, the next one is that they feel criticized or attacked. This is very common, and you might not even be doing this. Avoidants are very sensitive to criticism. Emotional reactions that you feel, genuinely you feel this way, they might perceive it as accusations. They may feel it as yelling, blaming, or they might feel like they're always doing something wrong and they can't make you happy. And so then in their mind, they think, okay, if I leave, my partner's gonna be happy. My partner will feel like they can get somebody they deserve. And in actuality, it's not like that at all. You're saying, I like you, which is why I expect something from you. In their mind, they're thinking, I'm not good enough. You don't like me. Let me free you of, how miserable I'm making you feel. And that's frustrating, because then you don't feel like you can be heard and understood. But that is a common dynamic. And that's what happens a lot in these relationships. And so it's actually, both individuals are not really communicating what they need in that particular moment, because you're almost describing it your emotion instead of instruction format. And they're feeling intense and confused and falling to their emotions instead of their instruction format. Really, they could say, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I need a minute. You could say, I feel like you ignore what I say or how I come across, like my genuine characteristics or how I want to show you love. You don't let me. I feel like you're shutting me off. And I would like if next time I want to do X, Y, and Z, you perceive it as me wanting to spend time with you, not me trying to take something from you. Instructions, right? Avoidant will give the instruction as well. I feel overwhelmed because I always tell you Wednesdays are my decompression day. I don't mind spending time with you and going on a date with you, but can we do it Friday? See, instructions and communication that's a little bit more clear, easier said than done, but that type of communication to that extent can really help these types of behaviors, okay? The next one is mismatched emotional needs. And this is all relationships, and it's tricky. But what happens is avoidance, they see this as a flaw. And what usually can happen is both of you guys need to match that emotional need more similar to one another. So avoidants are very detached. And maybe you're really pursuing and you really want this relationship and you want it to work and you love them and you want to show all those feelings. If you can decrease that a little bit externally to make it more palatable temporarily, they can show up a little bit more with their emotions, and now it's a little bit more matched. And this is even more difficult if an avoidant is very, very dismissive avoidant, let's just say, and we have a very, very anxious preoccupied, because you guys are very different. And the mismatched needs, it's a lot harder, because even if the avoidant is trying their very best and you're trying your very best, that mismatched emotional need can still be prominent. And so sometimes avoidants break up for that reason, but often they regret it because they realize that's not, maybe they could have tried harder, maybe you could have tried harder, and they broke up for an emotional reason, right? Some avoidants, most of them, need some sort of steady and calm communication, and others, fearful avoidants, for example, might need some of your intensity, which is why sometimes fearful avoidants like anxious preoccupied individuals, because sometimes you both can have that intensity, which fearful avoidance, some of them believe that means love. And so it depends on your partner. But in general, understanding how your partner perceives communication and love and how you perceive it and trying to meet in the middle about that can really help with this one, okay? And the last one is that the relationship in of itself actually felt draining instead of supportive. And you both might feel like this. Usually you both feel like this. It feels that the avoidant individual is feeling there's a lot of emotions going on. They're not really sure how to make you happy. They feel very confused. They feel very burned out. They really want to give you what you want, but they always feel like they're messing up. And then you feel like you're talking to a brick wall. You feel like you're screaming into the void, and there's absolutely no chance that they can hear you. And so you might even feel a little bit disinterested in connecting because you feel like I don't feel supported, I don't feel loved, and they feel like I feel criticized, I feel suffocated. And so what can you do with this? Obviously, I think couples therapy is a great way to, resolve some of these issues. But even without that intervention, sometimes what can happen is taking a moment to recognize the positives that you do have and communicating it out loud to one another and taking a break off some of the more common disagreements for now. Let's say one of the main issues that you guys have is intimacy in the bedroom. One person wants intimacy, the other person thinks, it's too much pressure, I don't want to, right? At least they don't want it right now, okay? So that's the issue. Really common, anxious, preoccupied, they want some intimacy. Avoidant is saying, no, you're pressuring me, I feel like a failure, I don't want to do it, okay? Different perspectives. And then they feel like every time you ask, it becomes draining because now it's another, point on their failure system and put it all over the place that they failed again and they're making you feel unloved. And then you're feeling drained and emotionally disinterested to some extent because you feel continuously rejected. But what can help is to put that topic on the back burner for now. Both of you guys agree this topic isn't going anywhere. Maybe we can talk about another time. Let's focus on happy things. Let's go on vacation together. Let's I don't know, go outside to the fire pit and cook some food together. Something along that line to which both of you guys can remember the happy times, but that doesn't mean you avoid these issues. You come back to it when you guys as a relationship is stronger and you trust each other more, okay? So let's go ahead and summarize. Some of the reasons why avoidants break up with you, whether they're permanent or not, it's up to you in the relationship to decide. And I have videos on if the breakup is permanent, so you guys can look at that. But they repeatedly say something that they felt was important to them, and you kind of took it as not caring. They feel emotionally overwhelmed. You feel emotionally overwhelmed. There's a communication breakdown. They feel criticized. The emotions might be mismatched, and you both feel like the relationship is draining instead of supportive. Today, we're going to go over a topic that I've touched on before, but a lot of you guys are new, plus you guys are asking about it. How do you know an ex still wants you, and is it your ex avoidant wants you, and is it correlated to how you left the relationship? And yes, it is. I personally believe that it's best if you left when you genuinely want to. Not because you wanted a reaction, not just because your friends told you, not because some person on the internet, including myself, told you to leave, not because someone said no contact is the best way to change an avoidant. I don't think that's the best way. And from what I've seen and what I've been seeing working with patients is that usually if you genuinely leave, that is usually when avoidants kind of realize that you cared about them and that they kind of brought you to that point. Whether they meant to or not doesn't really matter, but that's what occurred. And so that's kind of the main thing. It is your choice, and that's the main part of it. Now, we're going to break up all of those things as well. But I think some of y'all, I think you leave genuinely, and I think you have left genuinely. And now you're wondering if it was the right decision, or if your ex regrets losing you, or if there's a chance of getting back together after time has passed. And I think that's pretty normal. Yes, you left genuinely, but that doesn't mean the love isn't there. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So typically with avoidance, it's not the act of leaving. And I think people get that confused. The act of leaving is not what helps them to realize that they still want you. A lot of avoidants are married and their wife or husband has never left and they are happy. But sometimes it gets to the point where you want to leave for whatever reason. It's the way you behaved emotionally in that moment, emotionally charged situations, which means you can use this in a relationship that you don't plan on leaving. It's the same thing, but it translates also when you leave. That means, are you arguing? Are you disagreeing? Are you fighting to get your way? Whatever it is in these charged moments. And how does that look like? How does it look like when you argue, when you disagree, when you don't get what you want, even when you guys are about to break up? What do you look like? That is the main way that avoidants regret losing you, because they saw the genuine version of you and they didn't give you their genuine version. And that is why it hurts for them, because you gave them your all and they did not do the same. They didn't do the relationship that service. And that's part of the regret, okay? And so the first one is an interesting characteristic of this, but it is something that I see a lot in therapy, okay? You gave them like many chances is just the best way to put it. You tried many times, giving them plenty of opportunity to change, and they did not change. Now, the tricky part is often when you leave, when doing this, they're like begging you to stay, and then you're kind of already done. And so that's why it gets really tricky. But I'm going to give an example that I see a lot, and it's usually some of the main reasons why couples come into therapy, okay? Let's say I have a fearful avoidant
female and her husband is dismissive avoidant. And maybe he's a very stubborn man. He doesn't like to listen to anybody. He wants his wife to basically have like no emotions, no expectations of him, and he can do whatever he wants, but he's still loyal. He doesn't cheat. He doesn't do any of those things, but he also doesn't give her any emotional space. And maybe he's barely told her he loves her. Maybe he never has. And she's a fearful avoidant, so it didn't seem that bad at first for her. But as the years go on, maybe they've had a couple kids, they have dogs, and now she's feeling, maybe she's even healing herself. So now she wants more from him, and he's like not really wanting to do that. He raises the children very like harsh, and she doesn't like that. And so she's feeling really sad. And she's told him many times, be more gentle with me, be more gentle with the kids, speak more romantic to me, take me on dates, whatever it is, connect in the bedroom. We haven't had, intimacy in a long time. And he's like, that's too much pressure. I'm your husband. Isn't that enough? Whatever it is. So he's like very disagreeing with this, lady, hypothetical lady. And then one day she's had enough. She's decided, I've tried everything. I really have. I don't think this environment is safe for me. I don't think it's safe for the kids. And I don't think it's, safe for our family. I think it's better that we divorce. And suddenly now he remembers everything she said, even though before apparently he couldn't remember, he didn't care as much. Now he suddenly cares. And a lot of times what happens is they think, oh, if an avoidant does that, it's fake. It's not. Avoidants react differently to emotions and actions than other attachment styles. Avoidants see emotions as fleeting. They don't see it as completely valuable. They take action as more valuable. So if you're saying I'm leaving, that's an action. Saying I'm hurt that you're not giving me attention, that's an emotion. And so that's the reason why when you're about to leave now, they suddenly change. It doesn't mean that they're just trying to rope you in and trick you. That's not usually what it is. If they're a genuine avoidant and they truly love you, but just the attachment issue is a problem, that's what happens. And so what you can do if that's the case, maybe you did leave them. They usually do want to win you back and they do want to change for you. And if you want to give them a chance, I would say it's a good opportunity too, because it's not a manipulative tactic, it's genuine. The next one is you left with respect and set clear reasons to why you left. You explain that. So let's use this example of this wife and husband that we kind of came up with, okay? Let's say she said, I want a divorce because I feel like no matter how much I communicate with you, you shut me down. Sometimes you raise your voice, and I feel unloved because you never tell me you love me. You're not very affectionate, and we haven't had intimacy in the bedroom in years. I feel like these are valid reasons to leave. So she listed it out. Now he knows very, very, very clearly this is why she left me. I can fix those things. And if you did that, I'm sure you did it multiple times. I'm not saying it's your fault. And you left with that action piece. Usually that's when avoidants realize I really regret doing this because I know why this person left. I can't sit there and pretend it was anything more than exactly the list that my ex told me, okay? The next one is you did not call them names or, I guess, insult them in whatever way in the entire conversation of the divorce. So let's just say you said, I want a divorce, and you were very respectful about it. You didn't call them names. That doesn't mean that you're becoming all romantic. You want to divorce this person, but you were very clear. You didn't say you're emotionally detached and selfish. You didn't say that. You said, I don't feel loved. In this example, right? I don't feel loved. I feel confused all the time about where I stand. And I feel like you just being my husband is not enough. I want you to show me every day some version that you care about me, whether it's that you tell me, whether it's that you hug me, whether it's that you work on some of our issues, whether it's that you listen and don't interrupt me when I talk. You are explaining it from your perspective. You're not saying, hey, this is a problem that you have, you're mentally ill, whatever it is. You're not saying that. It makes them really realize how serious you are, and they can't use that subconscious belief that, oh, people are just emotional, because you weren't being emotional. You were being rational, and that's the language they speak. And the last one is interesting, but I really feel like it's important. You didn't tell them, never contact me again. Why this is important, it's not always the case, but when someone says never contact me again, avoidants perceive that first as a boundary, but second, and probably more importantly, an emotional response. And so if you did not say that, that makes them feel like you legitimately are done with them emotionally, but you're still being rational about it. If you say never contact me again, I'm done with you, you're, disgusting, whatever it is, they know that you have emotions. And in their mind, they're thinking, okay, you're not logical, you're not rational, you're going to come back, or you still want me, or it's not my fault, it's just you're too emotional, whatever it is. But if you don't mention that type of thing, they usually understand, okay, first of all, I have a chance to contact you again. I can reconcile. We can get back together. I can fight for the relationship. But it also proves that you were rational. So let's go ahead and summarize. After many times of giving them a chance, that's when you left. The second one, you left with respect and with clear reasons why you left. The third one is you didn't call them names or call them out or insult them. And the fourth one is you did not say, don't ever contact me again, or something of that sort. You were clear that you're just leaving for your own reasons, and there's not really a grudge necessarily, that you're processing it on your own time. Today, we're going to talk about trauma bond versus real love. And a lot of you guys were bringing up trauma bond as something that may happen with individuals who have insecure attachment, and it does happen. But trauma bond is actually, it's not the same as a dynamic of avoidant and attached anxious relationships. And we're going to talk about it. So trauma bond is typically characterized by a constant fear and relief cycle. This occurs when there's a strong power imbalance. And that's why some people can think that this can happen with people who are insecurely attached. It can, but it's not a common scenario because it's usually individuals who are being abused, honestly. That's typically where this is coming from. And so abusers can be insecurely attached. It's more common, but that doesn't mean every person who's with an avoidant or with a fearful avoidant or an anxious person is going to be in this situation. This is a specific characteristic, and it's not a healthy thing to be in. I don't recommend staying in relationships like this. I can't make decisions for you, but we're going to talk about it because some people are in these situations. Unlike healthy emotional connections, which involve consistency, trust, mutual respect, trauma bonds are actually built on power and this turbulent cycle of abuse and affection. So it's like a negative perspective and then affection. So that's where the cycle is coming from. That's where that fear relief cycle is occurring. This is not the same as like a push-pull dynamic of avoidant and anxious. And I'm like an avoidant, dismissive or fearful, and then an anxious preoccupied, or dismissive avoidant and a fearful avoidant, or even an avoidant and a secure, or an anxious and secure. It doesn't look like that, not necessarily. And we're going to talk about the differences so that you know what's happening. A trauma bond is typically formed by the inconsistency of emotions, attention, validation, and safety. And this is to an extreme level. Why not we give an example so that you can understand what I'm trying to illustrate? An example will be 1 week your partner calls you, let's say, beautiful, helpful, they appreciate you, but the next week that you're cursed at. You're told you will never be loved and you're humiliated. This is that flip-flop, that fear relief cycle. How can you tell if it's a trauma bond versus attachment issues and love? There can be an overlap, but there's an overlap between these issues with the fear and relief cycle. However, it's fundamentally different. When you're trauma bonded, emotional well-being and worth is often tied to the treatment you receive and response of a significant other. This is why it's tricky, because people who are anxiously attached and even fearful avoidant, they feel like this even with an avoidant, but the avoidant is not doing it. I'm not saying they're not creating issues, but they're not withholding your well-being. You might feel like that, but they're not necessarily doing it. When you're in love, like a healthy love, whatever it is, even if you guys didn't say that you love each other, there's a bond, like a genuine bond might be a better word. But you're insecurely attached, you may have triggered or even tried to please your partner. But in actuality, they might be resistant to you trying to please them and trying to make things right and always doing things that they want. And they might be resistant because that's not the issue. Their issue is their attachment style versus yours, maybe. Not saying you guys are fighting, but it's trying to learn these two different attachment styles. But it's not means of strategy of pleasing, because they're not looking for like a power trip. That's not what's happening. So when you like continuously people please and avoidant, they actually get uncomfortable, they pull away, they get annoyed, they think less of you. But it's not because they're abusing you. It's because that's not a trauma bond. When a person is traumatically bonded, these strategies actually can work. And this part that's really tricky is people, especially fearful avoidance, you had to do this with your parents. And so you might think that a relationship, you have to continuously do this. So it might feel a little bit like a trauma bond on your side, but it's actually not. This comes from childhood neglect and abuse. And so why don't we talk about the signs of a trauma bond so that you can kind of figure out where you're at? These, how would I even describe it? You might overlap with some of these based on your attachment style, but try to think, is this actually what's happening or is it what you're perceiving? And that's why it's tricky. And we'll talk about that more because some of these you'll see, even if you think this way in your mind that this is what's happening, you'll start seeing it might not actually be. So let's talk about it. The first one is that emotional roller coaster. You may swing between intense feelings of love and deep anxiety or fear. Now, this can happen depending on your attachment style and your partner's attachment style, but usually the fear is intense. You might feel like you can't leave, you're trapped, you might feel really lost and uncomfortable. You might feel always anxious, you might have trouble sleeping, you might have trouble functioning. And it's intense, very intense. And the love is also so intense. You guys think you are soulmates, you think you're, together forever. And there's also a lot of negative words. You guys might abuse each other if it's a trauma bond. You might say things that you wouldn't say in a healthy relationship. The next one is that fear relief cycle. This is very imperative to this situation. It can be as, usually sometimes there's violence involved, right? You guys had some physical altercation. And then after that, you forget like it's even there. You are happy, even more loving than before. And then it happens again. And it just keeps continuously going. The next one is the relationship tends to move incredibly quickly and very intense. This is not common with someone with attachment issues. If you're with an avoidant, this doesn't happen typically. Maybe with fearful avoidance, but like I had mentioned, the attachment style can be there, but that's not the main issue with a trauma bond. You can have two people who are insecurely attached who don't have this trauma bond, and the trauma bond is typically, like I'd mentioned, that imbalance of power. Typically it's common with abusive relationships. That's actually where that research comes from, okay? And that's the point of it. It's not really about insecure attachment, but it can overlap, which is why we're talking about it here, okay? The next one is feeling powerless. You often feel trapped, like we were talking about. You can't leave. Even when you're unhappy, you feel like this cannot be the case. There's a lot of coercion. There's a lot of force. There's a lot of discomfort. Your worth is tied to them. Your mood or your value is dependent on their approval. You feel like you two are against the world, like a very isolated mentality. It's very extreme, where you feel like it's just you two, nobody else, and you don't talk to your friends much, family, and you guys maybe live together. Very isolated. The next one is like I had mentioned, verbally, physically, emotionally devalued and degraded. You feel like you don't actually know each other, but you feel very intensely towards each other. So you don't actually know the real version of each other, just the intensity. And then your fights are incredibly emotionally driven and may even result in violence. And so that's typically more common with trauma bond. So let's talk about real love, genuine attachment, even with attachment issues. Healthy love typically has these qualities. You tend to have clash with compromise, so you have to learn how to compromise, to get on the same page and take turns. Not where one person is incredibly reactive and the other person is cowering with fear. The issue with this one is sometimes, especially if you're a fearful avoidant, you may react very reactive or cower with fear because you think the other person is doing that. But if you listen to what they're saying, they may actually be asking for compromise. Let's say you're a fearful avoidant and your partner is anxious attached, and they're saying, you never answer the phone and I get really frustrated. And you're like, okay, but you keep texting me multiple times. That makes me uncomfortable. I feel like you're overwhelming. There's something wrong with you. Let's say you said something really negative. But when you stop and listen, what are they saying underneath that? They're just saying, all I wish is that you could just tell me what's going on, right? This is actually, even it's coming across pretty abnormal with the insecure attachment. In reality, what you're seeing and hearing is that they're asking for something pretty reasonable. This is one way to tell the difference. The relationship builds slowly or slower. The feeling of guilt and shame is minimal or absent, or as a relationship increases and you guys are working on your issues, it's starting to decrease. You know each other, and to be honest, you know each other's flaws and you accept them, you talk about them, you get irritated by them, you fight about it sometimes, and whether you like it or not, you're still there, right? You support and grow together. That's what you're trying to do. Not just temporary to soothe the pain, you actually are trying to work things out. You can fight over small things and it doesn't become a huge deal, and you can fight over big things. And that might be a little bit more stressful, but typically violence is not introduced and name calling is not introduced or minimal. It's going to be really hard to summarize this video, but in general, trauma bonding is typically more common with abusive relationships. It actually is for abusive relationships. And genuine love, you can still have genuine love or genuine attachment and be insecurely attached. That doesn't mean you have a trauma bond. Today we're going to talk about why some avoidants rebound. Some of you guys were asking about this, so we're going to touch on this today because yes, avoidants do rebound, but the truth of the matter is any attachment style can get into a situation where they feel like a rebound is necessary. Necessary is obviously up for debate, but from their mind and their moment in the whether it's maladaptive or adaptive, they feel like a rebound is helpful. However, unfortunately, we do see that rebounds typically hurt all parties. The person who is being rebounded as the new partner, the previous partner, and also the individual. And I've touched on this before. A lot of times when an avoidant rebounds, you guys might think, am I the rebound? Typically, if you think your partner is an avoidant, you're not the rebound, because that means they showed their true colors. Oftentimes, the rebound partner does not see the avoidant part of the person because the avoidant is not showing their true colors with the rebound. They're just going through the motions and kind of covering up who they really are, not because they're trying to hide it from the rebound individuals, because they're trying to bury their true self because of the pain they're feeling. And so you're probably not the rebound if you're watching videos about avoidant attachment, to be honest. And it's sad for the person who is the rebound partner. And I hope that they find somebody, because it's very hurtful for all parties involved. As I think anybody can imagine, this is not a fun experience for anybody. And why do avoidants do this? It's very typical, similar to any attachment style. However, there's a little bit of specifics. So that's why we're touching on it today. First one is to avoid the feeling of loss. This is probably one of the most common reasons avoidants rebound, which is why I put it in the front. Okay. The feeling of loss is an intense emotion, and avoidants do not like intense emotions. They're just hard to sort out, but it's also hard to know what to do with them. And I think that when an avoidant feels a feeling of loss, they do have a feeling of wanting to reach out. That is usually their initial knee-jerk reaction. They want to get back with you. They want to, try and earn back your trust or whatever happened. But what happens when they have that feeling? The feeling of failure comes up, because that means that they made a mistake. Because then that means you guys broke up for no reason. So then maybe they made a mistake, or they're making a mistake now, or that relationship was a mistake, or they don't know, they're not good for relationships. And so a lot of their fears come up after they process the feeling of loss. And so they avoid that because it's very hard to face those triggers, especially obviously if you're unhealed. These are things that they have been avoiding their entire life, and they were very painful at one point when they were a kid. And so the feeling of loss is truly a very difficult feeling to process. And what is easier is something maladaptive. And a lot of times some avoidants do not rebound. What they do with this is they, get more into their hobbies, their maladaptive strategies, whatever it is. But some of them, they rebound because in their mind, there's another part of it that they want to, and which we're going to talk about soon enough, is they don't want to admit that the relationship meant something. And rebounding makes it seem like it was just another relationship. So the next one is that they tell themselves they don't need you. Like I was just mentioning, it's easier if they're, let's just put it this way. If you guys broke up and then they're back to the way they were before, that still can prove that you meant something to them, because they're going to see that their life is more empty. They're going to see their life is less full, in the sense less, like, it's more empty as an absence of you, but it's also less alive. And that shows that they need you. And they don't want to see that, because if they need you, that means they're not the independent person that their parents wanted them to be. They're not the, strong, stoic individual that they thought they're supposed to be. They're not. They're not the all-achieving person. They are not the person who's on an island. Like, I remember when me and my significant other first started dating. This was such a long time ago. But I remember I said something, which I don't remember what it was, but I was like embarrassed after I said it. And it's not that he was trying to embarrass me. And by the way, I've never rebounded, and nor has he. But it's just an example of how avoidants think the way they do. I said something, and he's like, you have this. Every time you say something, it's almost like you think you're on an island. Like the way he said it was not like that. It was like much more. It was very actually kind. Like he wasn't trying to make fun of me, but the way he said it was like it highlighted a lot of the ways I thought about, and it was embarrassing for me because I was pretty young and I didn't really. People have alluded to that about me, but they never said it in such a direct way before, and I didn't really realize that that was not normal. And when he said that, I was like, oh, like I didn't get it at first, but then I was like, oh, that's not normal, and I was more aware of it. And so avoidants have this thought, which they don't even realize, is like they're supposed to be like that. Like I thought that's how I was supposed to be. Like I thought that was a good thing. And the way he said it was almost like he was like, oh, like, why did that happen? Like, why do you feel like that? It made me almost like, oh, that's not normal. I'm weird for that. And that helped me. That alone kind of gave me some awareness. Obviously, I was probably easier to heal because I already had I had some awareness that attachment issues were an issue because my dad was, is avoidant and my mom is anxious. And that's like why they got divorced. And so I had some awareness that these behaviors might not be good, which is probably why I was able to heal relatively quickly. But avoidants don't realize that. So when you are gone and they feel that need for you, they don't want to think that it's you that's special. They want to say, okay, this is just like relationships are just they're like nothing. They're nothing important. Here, I'll prove it. Then they go to a rebound, which unfortunately doesn't mean much to them. Unfortunate for the rebound, and they can prove that again. The next one is they're trying to tell themselves that the way they feel is just temporary. And it sounds weird, but it's like it's temporary because your relationship is temporary, and then the next relationship is temporary. Feelings are temporary. Things are temporary. Everything is temporary. And so it's okay to jump into another relationship because that's temporary too, and that will end as well. And the next one will end, and the next one will end. You are not something that was so important to them that you're special, right? It's similar to them not needing you, but it's almost like needing you is one part of it, but this part of the equation is like there was a part of them that did want it to last for their whole life. And that kind of shocked them and hurts them. And so now they're trying to just convince themselves that everything is temporary, which is where the rebound aspect comes from. The next one is they're trying to distract themselves. They want to avoid feelings in general. They want to avoid memories. But also, when you love and care about someone, you will remember the fights that you have, and then you'll get a little angry about it, right? Like you'll get annoyed. You'll get frustrated. They said this or they did that, and they don't want to remember any of those things because that also proves that you matter to them, right? If some random person says something, you might be a little annoyed because like, okay, that's kind of rude. That was selfish, or like that was creepy. Maybe you'll feel like that, but you're not going to feel like it's going to be bothering you continuously. At least that's not something that some like people with anxiety, I understand, do that, but people who don't have anxiety, usually they don't really think about things further than what it is, at least not for too long unless they're trying to address something. But if you care about someone and that person you care about says something hurtful, it really sticks to you, and that distraction comes from it as well. Like a lot of avoidance, they remember a lot of things you say probably further than you remember, which is hurtful for them. And so they end up trying to distract themselves. And sadly, that other person is a distraction. And the last one is, okay, I think you guys know this, but maybe you don't. Relationships have a lot of habit and routine built into it. And the lack of that is hard to cope with, even for avoidance. And so sometimes they want to fill that gap, and the rebound fills that gap. So let's go ahead and summarize. They're avoiding the feelings of loss. They want to tell themselves they don't need you. They're trying to say relationships are temporary and that you're not special. They're trying to distract themselves from all the memories, all the pain, all the love. And the last one is it's habitual that they're used to you now, and so they want to replace you very quickly, similarly because they don't want to say that you're special. I hope today we're going to go over a video that was requested. Is your avoidant X on the rebound, and how does this happen? Do avoidants go on a rebound, or is it only like anxious or fearful, leaning anxious? And we'll get into all of that. And first, let's actually address that part. Do avoidants actually go on the rebound? Yes. Every attachment style I have worked with can have moments where they rebound. It happens a lot. And there are a couple of reasons why, and then we're going to talk about what it looks like. But what I've noticed is most of the time when it happens, it's because the relationship had some emotional investment typically, and it either ended badly or it was very heavy on them. That's typically why avoidants go on the rebound, where they date somebody just to avoid processing what happened. Because very often there's a mixture of things that happened. Usually it's your attachment style and their attachment style kind of clashed, and they also cared about you. And so those are two very intense feelings. The relationship failed and they cared about you. And I'm not saying that to make you feel better. I mean it. I say a lot of things that make you guys mad. So I'm just being honest. Usually if they're rebounding, it is because it's hard to admit that they lost somebody that was valuable to them. And they also don't want to admit that it failed so badly. And they also don't know who they turned into. They changed a lot, in a good way, in a bad way, and it's overwhelming. And so how do you know that they're going on a rebound in a rebound relationship? The relationship happened soon after you broke up. This is very obvious, but I think some people just miss it because they get so anxious and in their own head and think maybe they never liked you. Maybe this new person has some things that you don't. Most people need time to heal, especially from a heavy relationship. And so if you kind of feel like that relationship that they got into happened a little bit too fast, it's important not to doubt yourself, because what's going to happen at some point, unfortunately, is they might reach out to you even when they're in a relationship, and we're going to talk about that because it's going to come up later in the video, and that's not a good behavior at all, right? But people do it. People get lost, especially when they're not too much in their healing journey. They didn't process it. Now they're hurting their current person. They're also hurting you, and they're hurting themselves, and it's a lot of mess. But you don't want your mind to get warped in all of that stuff. So it's really important that you remain as confident as you can. And part of that is trusting yourself. If you feel like it's happening and it was too soon, it probably was. And so you don't want to get caught up in all the twisted stuff that's going on. The next one is at least emotionally, so you can at least be aware in case they come back, and you don't want to get more confused because it's already a confusing situation. The next one is the relationship looks intense. This is not always the case. It's more common if they're a fearful avoidant, but you can see that the relationship looks very loud, very obvious, very prominent, and it's really out of character, and they're acting like it's the best thing they've ever had because they're using it to cure the pain they're feeling temporarily. And they're happy about that. They're not happy about the relationship. They're happy they finally got some medicine, temporary medicine, to their broken heart to some extent. However, it doesn't last and it's not healthy. And so when it crashes, it's going to crash very hard, and they're going to pull away intensely from that person, which is unfortunate. Now, a lot of people are probably going to think that you might be the rebound to their relationship. Now, if you feel like you're the rebound, it's very important to realize that if your relationship started very, very intense, then it's possible, but you also want to be aware that if you were the rebound, you probably wouldn't know that they're avoidant. I know it sounds weird, but they don't act like an avoidant because they're not their real self in the rebound. And so it's unlikely somebody who's in a rebound situation is going to see this video because they don't think this person is avoidant. So I'm going to probably have to make a separate video on that because I probably confuse a lot of y'all. Okay, let's just move on. And the next one is your ex is not acting like themselves. That's what I was talking about earlier, but we'll go more detail in a separate video, but we're going to touch on it quickly right now. They're not acting like the person that you know. Maybe they're picky about certain things. Maybe they're controlling about certain things. They're not very social. They're critical. Sometimes they're mean. Sometimes they say things too harsh, and they're not doing any of those things with this person. They're like a completely different person. And that's what I meant overall. This person that they're dating, the rebound, has no idea this person is avoidant because they're not dating the real person. And that's sad for them. Like, I do feel bad for that situation. And it's a tricky situation in general, which is why I had mentioned earlier, but I continue to mention, trust yourself over your ex who's obviously acting confused and out of a lot of emotion that they're bottling, right? It's one thing to act out of emotion, but you're aware of the emotions. They're not even admitting the emotion. So this is going to be a train wreck. And I'm sorry to say that. So the least you could do is trust yourself because trusting them is obviously not working. The next one is they're overly public about it. If your ex is suddenly posting more than they used to, in terms of their usual posting, they are posting this relationship really frequently. They're telling everybody, they move quickly, and it can be performative. And sometimes it's because they're trying to convince themselves they're happy without you, or They might be trying to indirectly make sure that you don't think that they miss you. And it's very immature to do that to some extent, but it's also a very wounded thing. It's a very indirect, it's a poor communication strategy. And as we had already touched on, it's really unfortunate for the rebound partner as well. Not a good situation, but it does happen. The next one is two parts. Either the relationship really resemble yours or it doesn't resemble yours at all, okay? Most people do tend to get into relationships where people are similar to their exes. Not all the time, but there is a similarity. However, if it's very, very similar or very opposite, that can be very odd. So what do I mean by very similar resembling? Maybe they look very similar to you. This is very odd, but you've seen it with some celebrities where like they're clearly not over somebody and all their relationships one after another look almost exactly like their ex. That's what I mean. Really odd, okay? Or the relationship they look completely different. Maybe they have this particular type. They like people who are, I don't even know, a certain hair color or maybe a certain occupation or personality, whatever it is. And now this person is like the complete opposite, which is really odd, right? And that's another sign. And the last one is tricky and odd, but it is very true. And I'm not shaming anybody who does this. It's a trauma response. It's a lot of responses based on a lot of these emotions, but they still reach out. And this is unfortunate because they're in a relationship and you guys are done and they're still reaching out to you. And on the flip side, sometimes some avoidants, especially if they're fearful avoidant, they do this to sabotage the relationship when you're not a rebound. So that's why this one is tricky. I'm going to definitely have to make the video of if you're a rebound or not, because I know you guys are going to get confused, but very likely you're not, because then you wouldn't think the person's avoidant. But if they're still reaching out to you, even when they're occupied with something else, is if they have all these signs, and yes, they probably are on the rebound. And it's unfortunate because it's a really bad situation they need to heal. And so let's summarize and we'll wrap it up. The relationship happened soon after you broke up. The relationship looks very intense. Your ex doesn't act like themselves. They're overly public about it, very obvious. A lot of avoidants are more indirect with their relationship status. They are not comfortable with certain things. That's the real version of them. If they suddenly are showing up very public, very direct, that's just out of character. It's very odd. The next one is that their relationship either resembles yours very similarly, or that person physically resembles you, or in general resembles you very, very clearly, or it's the complete opposite to the point where they're abandoning themselves and their own desires. And the last one is they still reach out. Today, let's talk about something you guys have been requesting. How do I know my avoidant ex still thinks about me? How do I know they haven't moved on? And hopefully you expect, how do I know if they're going to come back? So today let's talk about it. The first one is actually they keep their doors open. This sounds pretty obvious, but I think a lot of people take it differently, okay? They may say things like maybe one day, or I still care about you, or I think about you sometimes. This is not because they're trying to string you along. This is them actually genuinely having a feeling. It's a very raw feeling. That's exactly how they feel. They're just telling you exactly how you feel. A lot of people take this as, oh, they're just stringing me along or they're lying to me. This is not true. With an avoidant, their emotions, it's hard for them to really communicate their emotions in general. So it's not going to sound as polished. It doesn't even sound like there's a plan behind it. When they say, I still care about you, they are saying that. Sometimes they are trying to tell you something, but they just don't know how to say it. Sometimes it's because they don't want to give your hopes up, but the emotion is so strong, right? Avoidants are very afraid typically to get your hopes up. And so it's going to be really hard for them to even admit this to you. So if they're admitting this, the door is very much open. They definitely still think about you and they have not moved on. Okay. The next one is they do make efforts to stay connected. There usually is some effort to maintain contact, either through messages, calls. It might be hanging out, but sometimes it can be very indirect. It can be just social media. It can be them just liking your pictures. It can be watching your stories. It can even be them posting about song lyrics or something of that sort that you understand, right? They are making an effort to stay connected in some shape or form. Now, even more common with avoidance is if they stay connected as like friends. I know that's very annoying and I understand completely, but often it's because they don't want you to go. Like they just want you in their life and they were not ready for the romantic relationship that you were ready for. But it doesn't mean they didn't care about you. In fact, all it meant for them typically is that you guys were just in a different place. you wanted a little bit more than they were able to give. But that doesn't mean that they don't want you. They do. And so sometimes what they do is they stay connected with you in hopes that one day they can show up emotionally the way you need, and then they don't have to go through, the whole forest and mountains to find you. You're right there. So the next one is actually initiating contact. They may initiate contact. They may say hello every now and again. They may send you something like a meme. They may send you a funny video. They may send you a TikTok. They may send you anything. It might be through different platforms, right? They may send you a reel. They may send you a video on YouTube. They may even try to send you like pictures of what they're doing in hopes to spark a conversation to some extent. But also there's a part of them that some of them want you like updated on their life. And sometimes it's even more based on the way you guys broke up. I'm going to give an example because I see this so much. Let's say you guys broke up because you felt like they are not serious about you and they're not serious about their career. Okay. And maybe they were in between jobs and you felt like that's evidence that they don't care about you because you have been asking them to be more, showing up a little bit more, and you felt like you were spending more in the relationship and they haven't been pulling their weight. And so you broke up with them. And so maybe they show you pictures of like their new job, or they show you like a picture of their resume, or that they have an interview coming up. They are showing you those things because they're trying to show you, hey, I'm changing, but they also are struggling with being vulnerable. So that's like their indirect way of showing. It sounds strange, but a lot of avoidants do that. The next one is they actually might share life events. Very similar, but it's usually a little bit more on the positive side, right? Because the other one is like initiating contact where they're trying to spark a conversation because they're hoping somewhere subconsciously you might say, oh, you are getting a job. This is great. Let's get back together. I'm not saying you would do that, but sometimes like they're subconsciously feeling that way. Sharing life events is more like they're trying to show you, hey, I'm still, doing well. If you ever, I'm not a negative space. I'm someone that can give you what you want. We can connect in this way. I have more to my life now. Life events could be that they bought a new house and they're showing you that because there's a part of them that was saying like, hey, I'm doing well, or, I'm still here if you ever need me, whatever it may be. They may show that their cousin had a baby. So they're still sharing their life because they're saying you're still part of my life, and what's happening in my life, I want you to know. Okay. The next one is they keep your photos, gifts, and messages. This one is tricky because some avoidants get rid of it right away because it's too painful. And then other avoidants, they keep those things because they miss you. And so it really depends. You know your partner better about how they behave in this way. But I'm going to give both reasons why they do what they do so you can understand, okay? So let's say you bought them a necklace, okay? And they kept this necklace and they always wear it. Now they wear it like every day. Before, they didn't wear it that often. Now they wear it all the time. Maybe you see it on their pictures. All the time they're wearing that necklace. This is because who you were in their life was really special. And that time in their life is something they don't want to let go of probably ever. A lot of avoidants are very, when they have someone they open up to, they get like very attached to that person. Okay. And so you might see them always having that, even more so because they really miss you. They may even have a photo of you. And that sounds a little strange. I'm not trying to say in like a creepy way, but often they don't really delete photos. Sometimes avoidants do that because they miss you. Now, some avoidants, depending, if they're in a relationship, sometimes they forget to delete photos. And so I'm not saying if your partner has like photos of their ex that they haven't moved on. That's not always the case. I'm just saying if they keep the photo in a very specific way, like on the phone background, right? Or they might have it. Maybe you guys framed a picture together. They still have that. That's kind of what I mean. It really depends because some avoidants, they just don't like getting rid of gifts in general. So it depends on how they treat it. Now, there's another type where avoidants, the gift that you gave them, anything about you, they have to like purge from their life completely because it's very, very painful, okay? This is a little bit more common with avoidant males. I think that's what I've noticed when I'm practicing. It's kind of hard because most of my patients are men. So maybe I'm wrong, could be very biased, but a lot of avoidant males I've noticed, okay? They completely get rid of everything that has to do with their ex, like completely. It's not that they're angry at you, but they just cannot even remember you. They don't want to. If you gave them something, even if it's like your Tupperware, they need to get rid of it. Even if it's just something that is not fully attached to you. Maybe you had a pen, your work pen, that had your company on it and you left it at their house, they don't care. They don't want it. Anything, they're done. They either give it to you or they get rid of it as quick as possible, right? Even if it's completely insignificant, because it's very painful for them to be reminded of you every time they go there. They can't. They want to get over you as quick as possible, okay? The next one and the last one is sometimes they will show jealousy, okay? They are bothered if you're dating someone else or if you're hanging out with, I mean, sometimes they might even do this if you're just hanging out with friends, and it's not in a way where they're trying to control you. It's just they're seeing that you have time and you're spending time without them, even if they're the ones that broke up with you. It's a very confusing feeling for them because they left you not because they don't love you. It's because they felt like they weren't good enough for you. And I know it sounds like an excuse, but it is true. They felt like they could not meet your needs. And so they're still going to have an emotion if you're doing things without them, because maybe you're hanging out with your friends and you guys could have been doing that together instead, right? Maybe you're dating someone new and there's a part of them that feels, I love this person. I was not enough, and this new guy or new girl is enough, right? It's very hard for them to see those things, but it doesn't mean they don't love you. And often this is a possibility they might come back. I don't know. It's up to you if you want them back, but it is something to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and summarize. The first one is they keep the door open. The next one is they make efforts to stay connected. The third one is they actually initiate contact. The fourth one is that they actually are sharing life events. The fifth one is they actually keep your photos, gifts, or messages, or they delete it and purge it completely, depending, right? I explained that a little earlier. And the last one is they show jealousy. I hope today we're going to talk about a topic that some of you guys have been asking about. Signs an avoidant is waiting on you to reach out or initiate. This can be frustrating because it can be if you're in a relationship with them, it can be if they're your ex. And so we're going to talk about both of those things kind of in conjunction, because this can apply to both situations for you to know, is your partner who's an avoidant waiting on you to initiate? Now, part of the reason why avoidants do this is because they're uncomfortable with vulnerability. But another reason is because a lot of avoidant individuals, they feel like they were the one that wronged you. And so they don't want to reach out because it makes them feel like they could be forcing you to connect with them, and they want to make sure that you're comfortable. Sometimes that's what they really are thinking, that if they're the person who hurt the relationship, they don't have a right to reach out. Or some of them, if they're fearful avoidant, they might, because they hurt you, they might be too embarrassed to reach out because they're afraid that if they reach out, you reject them. And then it really validates and proves to them that they failed and that you don't like them and that they're going to be abandoned. And so those are some of those reasons why. And so the first aspect that you can see that an avoidant actually is waiting for you to reach out is they actually wait for you to initiate conversations. And I'm going to unpack it because it's not necessarily that you'll be seeing them waiting. It's usually that when you initiate, this is how you'll know, they will reply fast, they will stay engaged, or maybe even keep the conversation going, but they rarely start it themselves. So this is a sign that they're actually waiting for you to reach out. So this could be that they're waiting for you to say, hey, let's get back together. It could be that they're saying, let's, be something more in a relationship. It could be that they are not very keen to making dates, but if you say let's go on a date, then they'll do it. And so another thing that you can do if this is part of the issue, where it's just that they wait for you to initiate everything, this is important to have a conversation, because a lot of avoidants some of them don't have the social skills, if I'm being completely honest, to understand some of these behaviors like initiating in conversation. Some of them actually just don't have that experience because they were taught to suppress certain things. And so having a conversation, I would like you to initiate things. I would like if you could do this more. Telling them that may actually just help. If you guys have a lot of rapport, that can help. Now, a lot of them, if they're fearful avoidant especially, but even some dismissive avoidant, some of them want to wait to see if you still want them, especially if you guys are broken up. And so that could be a reason why they're doing this as well. The next one is they stay consistently around you or within your orbit to some extent. I'm not sure how to word that. And it can be in many ways. Usually it's like a low risk type of contact or behavior. So they may send you an occasional meme, song, or something that reminds them of you. They may watch your Instagram stories or anything, right? They may kind of like watch you on the internet and you can see that. They may like or react to your posts to some extent. They may be around you like they're still in your friend group, or they still they don't leave certain areas where you're around. Like let's say you guys are, you're friends, and as in you guys have the same friend group, they don't avoid sitting next to you or being around you. They actually are completely fine with it. And sometimes it's because a lot of people, if they don't want the relationship, they usually are trying to really signal that as well. But if they're not doing that, it might mean they're on the fence or they want you to say something. The next one is they check in emotionally. Usually this happens if they feel like they did hurt you. They might say, how have you been doing? Is work still stressing you out? Are you doing okay? And this signifies that there is something emotional still. Most people, if they do this, it's not, a lot of people who don't want a relationship, they know that this is not going to do anything. But a lot of times avoidants are doing this because they do still care. And sometimes they don't realize what their emotions are leading them to. And so they may not even realize why they're doing some of these things. If I'm being honest, they might just ask, are you doing okay? Because they are genuinely worried. They know that work is stressful for you and they don't want you to be stressed out. And so they want to know. You're on their mind a lot. And sometimes with avoidance, when someone's on their mind, it can be very impacting of their behavior and it can be very heavy. And so this may take a little longer for it to show up, but often what they're doing is they're checking in on you because the pressure and the thought of you in your absence can be really overwhelming. And so they are reaching out to diminish some of that overwhelming feeling because they don't know what it is. And so sometimes this is an opportunity for you to at some point initiate something further because this is a sign that they're still processing a lot of the feelings that they have about you. They are still not over you. The next one is they bring up the past, and it's usually in a positive way, or if it's in a negative way, it's about some sort of way that they want to have further communication about it. So they might say, I feel like our relationship didn't work because you were always texting me during times when I would get overwhelmed. If they say something like that, that one actually, believe it or not, is pretty easy for them to get more comfortable connecting with you because all you really have to do is say, I think you're right. I feel like I've changed. Do you want to give this another shot? Because I really feel that I take accountability for that and I can change. Then another one could be that they feel, this one's a little harder, if they feel like they did something really wrong, they might say, I feel like I could never give you what you want. And if they're saying something like that, and they're saying like our relationship was good, but I feel like I never gave you what you want. And I feel like that's what pushed us away. I didn't know how to give you what you want. And we're different people. Sometimes that one's tricky because sometimes you would have to say, maybe I pressured you too much or something of that sort. Or you would have to say, like, this one doesn't work as often because it's harder because it has to do with their wounds. If you say, I get that. I wish that you could just try harder. Things like that would make it a little harder for them to connect because they're not at that place yet. But still, you can have that conversation. The next one could be like, similarly, we're still on the same topic. They may share memories. They may say old jokes. It's usually like them trying to say, I miss you, or we're really good together, but they're kind of testing the waters to see if you agree. The next one is they hint at regrets instead of directly apologizing. I didn't handle things the best. I wish I had done things differently. At this time, you can say, I wish I had done things differently too. And then you can talk about, I wish that we were still together. I wish that we could still connect in a certain way. The next one is that they ask, or it's not really they ask, it's like they're friends. Their friends are like more warm towards you or more kind to you. They might ask you how you're doing. They may mention that your ex brought you up. Or if you guys are still in a relationship, their friends are a little bit more comfortable towards you because they're almost trying to gauge at how you feel about their friend, for example. And the next one is they might ask about your future plans. And so they're asking you, are you in a long-term relationship? Are you going to move out? Are you going to move to a different state? Whatever it is, because they still feel like there's some connection that you guys have together. And they probably are trying to gauge like when they can initiate, if you want to initiate, like they're trying to figure out how to fit your future into their future because they don't want to lose you. So let's summarize and then we'll wrap it up. The first one is that they actually wait for you to initiate conversations and they reply pretty quickly when you do. The next one is they stay in your orbit. Sometimes this is with social media, but it can also be with friends. They're still in your friend group. They may watch your stories, whatever that may be. The third one is they check in emotionally. typically asking about how you feel, not necessarily about how they feel, even though that can happen too. But it's more like, are you doing okay? Is work stressing you out? Things like that. They may bring up the past. It can be typically in a positive way, but it can be in a negative way as well. But it's usually in a way where it's like there's still hope. And I described that earlier in the video. The next one is that they hint at regret, but they don't directly apologize. Things like, I didn't handle things the best. The next one is their friends are comfortable or warm towards you, and they may actually ask you questions. And the last one is they ask about your future plans. This is because they're trying to see if there's a way that your future plans can fit your future plans and their future plans. Today we're going to talk about a topic that was requested, how to reach out to an avoidant to get them to respond. Now the request was about an ex, and they asked for a compilation, which I will do that eventually. But I wanted to start with an introduction of kind of some ideas that we can kind of throw out there, and your thoughts as well, all of your thoughts about what you guys feel about how to get an avoidant to respond in a particular way, especially when the situation is a little more strained, like an ex or after an argument. So that's our focus today. And actually the first one is to keep the message somewhat low pressure. And why I said somewhat is I don't want it to just be like a, hey, how are you doing? Right? That's vague. I want the message to have some clarity while still being low pressure. We don't want it vague though. A lot of people think low pressure means vague. Vague is not helpful because you don't get the result you're looking for. It's a waste of your time, if I'm being honest. And at the end of the day, yes, you don't want to trigger another individual, right? But you also have to focus on yourself first and foremost. And vagueness just is not good for you, right? Because the whole point of this is you guys want them to respond. And you won't get a good answer if it's vague. And so I'm going to give an example of what I believe is like a low pressure message, but it's still not vague. You can say something like, hey, just checking in, no rush to reply, right? You want to, especially if you guys are exes, you don't want them to feel pressured. And sometimes adding that can help. And then you can say, when you get a chance, let me know if you are okay. Let's say that's what you're wondering. Maybe they didn't text you for a while. Or when you get a chance, let me know if we can have a phone call. That could be an example. Or when you get a chance, let me know how you're feeling. Whatever it is. Or no rush to reply. I just wanted to let you know I miss you. It can be anything like that, but you want it to be a little more direct. The end of it must be direct. That's how I perceive it. And if you're in a relationship and it's after a fight, that's why I mentioned, like, let me know if you're okay. Or you can say, let me know if you want to talk about anything. Something of that sort, okay? The next one is taking accountability. This one's going to really help. By the way, this one, if you feel like you've tried pretty much everything and you haven't tried this one, try this one. It does help a lot. And it's hard because you might be feeling like you're taking accountability for something maybe you didn't do. And that makes sense. And you can angle it in a different way. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, let's give some examples of when this can work. This is really good after a fight or a breakup. You can say something about, how are you? I've been thinking about our recent argument and I realize the mistakes I've made. I want to try again with you. Are you open to this? So that would be like a breakup, okay? If you feel like you don't want to take accountability because you genuinely feel like you didn't do anything wrong, you can say, how are you? I've been thinking of our recent arguments and I feel like both of us have a lot to learn and I want to learn them with you. Are you open to trying again in our relationship? Because that's how I feel. Something like that. And so it's not necessarily you're taking full accountability. You're actually just saying that you have a lot to learn because we all do. Right? And that'll also help them to feel their guard down because they don't feel like they're the only person that's going to be reprimanded or getting in trouble or anything like that, right? It does really help. And so I want you guys to really consider this one. And another example could actually be, I don't want you to straight up just say, I'm sorry, because you want to have a angle at the end. You want to have a way that they can get in contact with you. So you can say, how are you? Maybe you raise your voice. I realize that I raised my voice during our argument. I'm sorry. Or I realize I didn't act that well during our breakup. I'm sorry. I still want to, be with you. Are you open to this as well? You can have it from that angle, but I don't want you to keep it, like I mentioned, I don't want you to keep it vague because that's a waste of your time. The next one is kind of the same thing we've been talking about, but it's just a point that I wanted to keep separate so you guys really understand. This is one of the biggest emphasis to this video, okay? And it's because it's very important. You want to be clear and direct. No matter who a person is, right? Clear and direct really helps because it avoids them giving you an ambiguous message. And if they give you an ambiguous message, even when you are clear and direct, it lets you know where they're at. It gives you two pieces of information. And that's very, very important. So let's give an example of some clear and direct communication, regardless of what stage you are in with this individual. Are you free sometime this week to talk for a few minutes? I'm open Saturday and Friday. Let me know. We're pretty specific about it. And we're going to talk about that specific point, the next point, but we're going to give more examples of direct and clear. You can mention, I feel like that argument was really difficult for me. Are you available after work today that we can discuss, right? Or you could mention, if it's been a long time since you've seen each other, I realize I still think about you and I miss you a lot. Do you feel like there's any hope that we can get back together? I want to have a conversation with you about this. Are you available sometime this week? Adding some direct clarification can really help, but it really does depend on how the relationship was. But to be very honest, I feel like if you have to tiptoe so much around a person that's already not in your life, like what's even the point in being with them? Because if it's such a point where you have to play all these games and they're your ex, like you might as well just let them go. And I'm not saying that's your decision, but I think your time is also precious. Like I don't think it's helpful to beat around the bush. I understand a lot of you guys do that because you're afraid to trigger them, but just they're already gone halfway. Like if they're triggered, they're going to be triggered. At this point, I feel like you might as well just do what you got to do. And the other point I was mentioning is give them an easy way to respond. And I'm going to explain this. You want to do small, manageable steps that have a step-by-step built in there. So examples would be like, would Thursday or Friday work better, right? That's an example instead of let me know when you're available because you had blocked it off, right? You mentioned would Thursday or Friday be available? Does after work today or tomorrow work? Do you want to go on a date? Monday or Tuesday? Those are my times available, and I know you're available as well. You make it very clear what you're asking for. An example that's not necessarily about an ex, but let's say even in a relationship. You can mention, I want to go on a date sometime this week. Do you want to do something Saturday and Friday? Saturday or Friday. Let me know your thoughts. I'm looking at maybe going to a restaurant. It allows them to have some angle because a date, you want them to have some involvement, which is why I gave that example. You gave some leeway for their explanation or their preference, but you still put your preference as well because it allows them to, if you want them to take initiative, allows them to know how to do so, which is why you want to do this, okay? The next one is you do want to acknowledge their space. This is only if you feel like that's what they need. Because if it's been like 5 months, you don't need to say, hey, you might need some space. It's been long enough, right? But let's say it's after an argument, okay? Sometimes mentioning that you respect their space can be really beneficial. You can mention, I understand if you need space and I do respect that. That is completely okay. I just wanted you to message me when you're feeling a little bit better so I know if we can talk things out. Something of that sort can be beneficial. That's what this one can be a little bit less direct or like it's less instructional because their need for space, you can't just be like, oh, my need for space is going to be over at 7:04 p.m., right? They do not know that. And so that's why it's a little more vague on this one. But as I mentioned, if they're your ex and you guys broke up and it's been like a year, you don't need to do this one. This one is not necessary for that particular case. Nostalgia, however, is almost very particular for exes, and that's the next point, okay? Sometimes referencing a memory can lower defenses, right? I think a lot of people know this. It is true, and a lot of times people are afraid to do this because they feel like it's very vulnerable, but they're already your ex if you're at this stage, so what do you have to lose, honestly? That's just my preference. I could be wrong. I passed by a coffee shop, for example, that we used to go, and I remember you. I wanted to let you know I still think of you fondly, and I feel like maybe we can give this relationship another chance, right? Mentioning these things that you want this relationship to be reignited to some extent can help. Some people don't like doing that, maybe because you're not ready either. And if that's the case, you can tread lightly. You can take that part off. But I am mentioning that by doing that, you might just put yourself in a more confusing cycle, right? And you don't want that. I don't want that for you, which is why I would prefer if you guys were more direct, but it's up to you. So let's summarize and then we'll wrap it up. Keep the messages low pressure, but they're still clear. Be clear and direct. Give them an easy way to respond. So you want to have like a step-by-step instruction kind of put in there. Give space, typically not needed if you guys are exes, and then use nostalgia. That one is more common with an ex.